From UFOs to psychic powers and government conspiracies, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know.
The narrative that a lot of children in the U.S. are taught in school is inarguably sanitized in some ways, right? Or at least focuses on some things and kind of glosses over others. And if you count the mock trial as at the very least the closest to a trial that Ray got, it may surprise other people to know that the King family successfully won a civil suit in 1999. This suit, I believe, also, at least temporarily, inspired the Department of Justice to reopen their investigation. Could you tell us a little bit about the civil suit, a little bit about how, like the order of operations in which it broke down, and what that means to the investigation as people perceive it today? I'm looking specifically for the finding where they agreed it was a conspiracy.
It was a terrific idea because it was a way to use a civil suit to sue a person who they knew was involved in the murder, and then various unnamed government agencies in the murder of Martin Luther King. And you know, they were only asking for $100 worth of damages. But what the whole purpose of it was that they could get, in the context of this trial, they could get all the witnesses that were still alive and that could testify, get them up and have them testify under oath in a court of law and have that testimony be part of that trial. And so where it would be accessible to history. And so that was the big takeaway there. And the fact that they won the case, I don't think means a whole lot because there wasn't a lot of opposition on the other side. They were only looking for $100. To a certain extent, it wasn't as important event as you might think it was in terms of the verdict. But in terms of the process, in terms of all the people who went and testified, in terms of the participation of the King family and what Coretta Scott King said after the trial, that's the importance of it. So sometimes people say, oh, well, there really wasn't anybody fighting on the other side. And that's the truth. And they could have made a bigger mess of things if there had been. What it was a way to get the evidence out in front. And they did that.
So I want to talk about the Department of Justice's reaction to that trial and to its conclusion. I'm going to read you a tiny little excerpt here from their website, justice.gov. They say, we recommend no further federal investigation of the Jowers allegations. The man's name is Lloyd Jowers, by the way, who was sued. Or any other allegations related to the assassination unless and until reliable substantiating facts are presented. At this time, we are aware of no information to warrant any further investigation of the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. So they say that in response to everything that came forward during that civil trial, stuff that had occurred before, which, you know, became a part of the civil trial. Why do you, Bill, think there is more to this case than the Justice Department does?
Well, they came to the same conclusion that the FBI came to the day after Martin Luther King was shot. They came to the same conclusion that a House Select Committee on Assassinations came to, even though there were numerous examples of the House Select Committee stumbling on some piece of the truth and then all of a sudden realize they're in that situation and they make up another cockamamie story instead of saying, oh, I see James Earl Ray actually didn't have a racial motive and he wasn't driven by hate. Do they then say, oh, maybe he didn't shoot King? No, they say, well, he probably did it to get a reward for the bounty, of which there is no evidence at all. And several different times they would come upon something like that Percy Foreman was a big liar was another one of their conclusions, because he went and testified and he just revealed himself as a total craphead. And they said nothing he said can be relied upon. Do they then think, oh, maybe this guy who pushed his way into the case, who's such a liar, maybe he was working for somebody else. No, they don't do that. They just shrug it off. When they finally come to the conclusion that James Earl Ray going back and exchanging the rifle he bought for another rifle, they finally realize, oh my goodness, this is 10 years later. That probably means there was somebody else involved. Of course, that's what it means.
Dun, dun.
Right? So, and they come to that conclusion, but oh my goodness, that can't be, because that's what Ray said. That can't be true. So the next best thing is, it was probably his brother, and that keeps it all in the family. So they keep stumbling over these things that should be clues as to there's something else going on here, and they just make up another phony story. And so the same thing with the Justice Department. Their job was, it gets handed down, and then they go and they find every little reason to disbelieve every single witness. Oh, this guy lied to his 7th grade teacher about something or other. And so, that was their job. Their job was to find, come out and say, there's nothing to worry about, folks. We've been back in there. We've looked at the evidence. Don't worry. There's nothing to see. That's what they're paid to do.
And this, I think, could use a little context for our audience today, because at times concurrent with these investigations, or with these shutdowns of investigations, the public was slowly learning about a government program called Cointelpro. And it wasn't, I believe, confirmed for some time, at least officially, until after King's death, that Cointelpro, which was a surveillance and monitoring program on the part of Uncle Sam, was actively monitoring and even harassing King and members of his family. Was the DOJ or the FBI, were they motivated to perhaps go with their convenient narrative despite the contradictory facts because of knowledge of Cointelpro? Or do you believe that played any role in their calculus there?
I don't think that played a role in the calculus so much. I mean, when Cointelpro came out, everybody was horribly embarrassed. The church committee had hearings, and they were particularly outraged at how this program was used on Dr. King. And so there was a lot of outrage about that. But if you follow it back, it's really hard to understand why Hoover went after King in such a way. Here you had a black leader who had a lot of moral authority and who was standing up and telling people, yes, we want our rights, we want what is due to us, and we want to be nonviolent. We want to obey the law. We want, he was not preaching violence, and yet they were going after him like he was a great danger to the society. And and Hoover was pretending all the time that somehow King was falling under the control of communists, and that was the big reason that he had to have the right to wiretap King. And it's a pretty sad story in the States. Bobby Kennedy briefly gave him the right to wiretap for 1 month, and that was supposed to be, see if you can come up with any, information, communist information, for 1 month. And then John Kennedy was then murdered right after that, and any control that Bobby Kennedy had over Hoover instantly evaporated. And Hoover, within a month, held a big meeting in Washington that Kennedy didn't know about, where all they did was discuss different ways they could bring down Martin Luther King, and that's a matter of record. So it's not clear. Well, he got started, but it's to this day that they're bringing stuff out like, oh, they have this tape recording of, Dr. King laughing and watching some woman being raped. They are killing the man. They killed the man, and then now they're assassinating his character. They did get tapes of King, and did King have sex with women who were not his wife? I assume he probably did, but that's between him and Coretta, and it's none of our business particularly. And the idea, and we know that they monkeyed around with these tapes as they would do. And I don't trust anything that is produced today saying, Martin Luther King helped rape a woman, and we have it here on tape. And I think it's absolutely disgusting that, I listen every once in a while. I'll just to refresh my soul on this thing, I'll listen to a speech that King gave one place or another. And the other day, I just listened to the entire Riverside Church speech on Vietnam. And I would recommend to anybody, if you want to know about Martin Luther King, you want to know about his character, you want to know about his courage, you listen to that speech, because he's standing up. He's the first major public figure to stand up and say, this is wrong. And he knows when he does it, it's going to mean the money's going to dry up on his end, and he's going to make big enemies. And he stands up and said, this is wrong to be doing what we're doing there. And, you listen to a tape like that and then hear these people bringing forward little stuff to assassinate his character. It makes me sick.
And just to remind everybody, that speech was given exactly 1 year to the day before he was assassinated. And following that speech, that's when he was called a communist by newspapers and, prominent media figures. So just keep that in context.
I mean, I think it's like most of us can tell the difference between rhetoric and political posturing and what Dr. King did. I mean, when you hear him speak, it has a magic to it. There's an absolute, level of charisma that is outside of the charisma of a politician, or someone who is trying to kind of twist the screw and make people behave as they want to. This is a man that put himself in harm's way, that put his reputation, out there in a way where people could besmirch him at every turn, and he didn't care. And so when you hear him make these speeches, they are absolutely the real deal. I mean, whatever you may think, I think that comes through. And I think it's interesting when we're getting towards kind of the intent, like why assassinate Martin Luther King? Yes, he represented a movement, of course, and he was the fifth face of this movement, but the problems that led to the movement being necessary pre-exist, the movement, and you can't really get rid of that problem or the people's discontentment by killing a man. If anything, it's going to make them angrier. And I heard someone in commenting on this tragic event of his passing that they didn't realize that he was the white man's biggest advocate in terms of, keeping these riots from destroying, society and from being out there and preaching nonviolence and things like that. Can you kind of speak to that side of Dr. King and how maybe the people that were trying to assassinate his character, let alone him physically, maybe missed the point, missed that whole idea that he really was kind of there to help them?
It's a little hard to understand. Hoover is a big part of this equation. He's not the only piece, but Hoover had some sort of hatred towards King that is a little bit unexplainable. I think he was a little jealous. I think he was jealous of King and didn't like the attention he was getting. And he liked being the guy that was pushing all the pieces around. And he was used to getting his way because he had secret files on everybody. And he had a lot of files on John F. Kennedy. And one of the reasons that Bobby Kennedy ended up agreeing to the limited wiretapping thing that Hoover so badly wanted was that Hoover had just gotten Kennedy out of another one of his sexual escapades, scrapes with Ellen Ramesh, who was thought to maybe be connected to East German intelligence. And so after Hoover rescued Kennedy in his presidency, that might have gone down because they were going to have congressional hearings on this thing. And Hoover then met with the heads of Congress and the Senate and saying, this is going to, blow up in everybody's face and we can't do this and la-da-da. And he got Kennedy out of it. And then he went back to Bobby and said, well, do I get my wiretaps? And at that point, Bobby said, yeah, okay, for a month or whatever, if you really think you can dig up stuff. And they often said, Bobby Kennedy was the one who decided to wiretap King. It's not true. He consented because basically their hand was forced, and they owed it to Hoover, who not only got him out of that trouble, but got him out of other sexual trouble that he'd gotten himself into.
A quid pro quo, it appears. This might surprise many people to learn that those kind of deals, unofficial but impactful, can occur, and they often occur outside of the public sphere. They're things that the public will learn about in retrospect. And when we're talking about murkiness, Bill, one thing that really stands out to me in episode 3 specifically, we were fortunate enough to get a sneak peek, is just the sheer profundity of murkiness that is involved in the story of James Earl Ray. And I think this gave a lot of red meat to people who were initially claiming there was a cover-up or corruption involved. And I'd love to hear you talk about some things that really stood out to me in your conversations in episode 3, wherein we already talked about how Ray never actually went to a jury trial. He very early on recanted his guilty plea, but he also managed to escape from incarceration, never spoke about who may have assisted him. And despite the fact that he was known to be a petty criminal, our understanding is that he was also found with some pretty good fake identification at one point. Also, let's just throw this out here and emphasize this again. The guy was arrested in Great Britain. How does a petty criminal, who actually doesn't sound like they're that great at petty crime, how does a petty criminal manage to achieve all of these things, to escape from incarceration, to have actionable, like, I'll say it, maybe pro-level fake IDs, and then how does he get across the pond? Are there any answers to these questions?
Well, we're going to be called conspiracy theorists anyway. So, and I don't think of myself as conspiracy theorist. I'm not a conspiracy guy. I'm an evidence guy. But there are some places where you need to just sort of apply theory to it. And I think his escape from prison is one of them. There is evidence. Ronnie Lee Atkins claims that he and his father drove out to Missouri with $25,000 and gave it to the prison warden in exchange for the release of James Earl Ray. And the idea was that they were looking for some, and they may have had other ideas of other people they wanted to use, but they were looking for someone they could use to be a fall guy, and they thought this guy Ray was perfect for them. And so they allowed him to escape, arranged for him to escape in this bread truck. And then they just kept tabs on him as he traveled around in Canada and other places, and then kind of directed him here or there. It may be that at one point he was sent down to Birmingham and then nothing happened. There might have been some plot to kill King in Birmingham. He was out in Los Angeles for a long time. They say he stalked King. He didn't stalk King. He was out in Los Angeles. King came to Los Angeles. The thing with Ray is that he would never rat on anybody who helped him. So whether it was whoever helped him escape from prison, this was his culture. He had spent almost his entire adult life in prison, and one of the things he learned is that you just don't rat out anybody, and he wouldn't. Yes, he had fake identities of people that he could never have gotten on his own. He had to have help escaping from prison. He could not have made that escape on his own. He had to have help and probably permission. So there are places where he just will not tell, even to Bill Pepper, various things. He met with people in New Orleans. He says he met with Raul in New Orleans. It might have been more people than that. Maybe Carlos Marcello was in the room. But what good does it do him to say that? Because that'll only assure he gets killed in prison. So it may be that it's a more complicated story than he's been willing to let on. But he knows that, if he starts saying, well, there were these mob guys in New Orleans that I met, it will be the end for him. So I don't know. That's just an idea I have in my head. But he's he's a strange character, and I don't believe he shot Martin Luther King. I don't believe he knew Martin Luther King was going to be shot. But I don't know I don't think that everything he told Bill Pepper is necessarily the truth.